So thank you for coming to our Phase 2, otherwise known as Small Ms4 General Permit. For those of you who do not know what Ms4 stands for, is Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. Welcome to stakeholders that are here in person, as well as those that we have on virtual, the wavelengths, via webcast. So we have an exciting presentation for you. We're here starting our renewal process for the general permit. As you know, we start almost 2 years in advance, so we're really excited to present to you some preliminary proposed changes that we have. So first of all, we would like to introduce ourselves. So my name is Rebecca Villalba. In case you don't know me, I am the Stormwater team leader in the Water Quality Division. And so I'll go around the room this way.
Good afternoon. My name is Michaela Coleman. I'm a permit writer on the Stormwater team.
My name is Danielle Monroe and work with the Customer Information and Assistance team in the Water Quality Division.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Dante Fichetti. I'm a permit writer on the Stormwater team as well.
I'm Aubrey Puelka. I'm from the Environmental Law Division.
Hi, everyone. I'm Madison Taylor, and I'm a permit writer on the Stormwater team.
The microphone will be passed around to introduce people.
Lee Flores with the Customer Information and Assistance team.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jesse Gress. I'm a permit writer with the Stormwater team as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Leland Moore. I'm a permit writer on the Stormwater team as well.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Monica Alba Garcia. I'm a permit writer on the Stormwater team as well.
Hello, my name is Liz Stone, and I'm with Quiddity Engineering, formerly Jones & Carter.
Hello, Mark Geely, City of Waco Watershed Protection.
Hi, Thomas Chandler with TRC Companies here in town.
Hi, I'm Lauren Gonzalez with Black & Beach.
Dennis Nielsen, I'm with the City of Cedar Park Stormwater Coordinator.
Mike Larash, City of Cedar Park Stormwater and Streets Division.
John Consian with LJ Engineering.
I'm Brian French with LJ Engineering.
I'm Adrian Jingo with Brazoria Drainage District number 4.
Jesse Spears with Lloyd Goslink.
Thank you. And sorry, Danielle, do we know how many people we have with webcast?
So far that I've counted, it's about 30 folks online.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Those are the introductions. So now we will go ahead and begin telling you what we have on the agenda for today. So first slide, please. Okay, second slide, please. Okay, so this is our agenda. So for today, first of all, we did the welcome and introduction. Then we're going to start the meeting with a goals and objectives. We're going to tell you why we are here and why you are critical to the renewal process. Then we're going to give you an overview of the renewal timeline that we have for this general permit, as well as a brief overview of the existing general permit that will be done by Michaela. And by the way, she didn't tell you, but she is the project manager leading this MS4 renewal. Then we will go over the summary of the preliminary proposed changes, specifically focusing on moving forward to a comprehensive type permit, as well as revisions that are required due to the electronic reporting. So that will be for applications and your annual report. And then other modifications and clarifications that we have so far identified for this general permit. Once we go over this presentation, then we will open it up to questions and comments that you have. We really want to hear what you have, what you think of what we presented. But just know that this is not going to be the only time that you will have the opportunity to give us comments. You have 2 weeks as of today to provide comments. So if you're not ready yet to talk to us about it, then you can go ahead and submit your comments in writing. Then we will end the meeting, adjourn it, and so we are scheduled to be here till 4:30. But of course, we're here until it's needed based on, your comments, concerns. We will also be hearing from people that are on webcast. If they have comments or questions, Danielle will be reading them over so that we can also address them. But before we dive in, some housekeeping items. Please make sure that you sign in. If you haven't signed in, there's a sign-up sheet, right over there as you enter the door to the room. Those of you that are on webcast, be sure that you send in your name and organization in an email to outreach@tcq.texas.gov so that you can be registered and recorded as being in attendance at this meeting. Please, we ask that you hold your questions and comments until the portion where we're going to specifically ask you for your input. During the presentation, we just want to move through that. And then at the end, when we get to the discussion portion, that's when we want to, have your questions and comments. Again, those of you on webcast, if you have any comments or questions, please submit them to outreach@tcq.texas.gov. Of course, you are online, you're in front of your computer. You don't have to wait until the stakeholder discussion to submit those comments or questions. However, Danielle will not be reading those to us until we get to that portion of the meeting. Everybody, at the entrance, there is a handout. There's a meeting handout, and this is also posted online. We posted it on Friday for those of you that were interested to read the handout and go over those preliminary proposed changes that we're going to be presenting here, as well as the presentation slides. Those are already posted on our website, so when you go back, you can go ahead and download those slides if you want to, as well as this meeting, since it's webcasted, we are going to have it afterwards available on our TCQ YouTube channel. So you'll be able to relive this meeting as many times as you want to. Okay, so this is basically what you're going to see every time we move from one section to the next. So we will go ahead and start first with the objectives and goals of this permit. So of course, we want to facilitate stakeholder involvement in the 2024 renewal of our Phase 2 General Permit. We want to let you know what we have so far as preliminary proposed changes and requirements. We want to explain to you where those preliminary proposed changes are coming from, what is the driver for some of those changes, and explain to you why they are needed. And then, of course, to demonstrate some of those preliminary proposed changes, why those are beneficial not only to you all, but to us, in both in terms of resources and that come in the form of money as well as staff. Then we want to, of course, another big goal of this meeting is for you to provide comments, feedback. We want to hear from you. What is it that you like? Hopefully everything is amazing to you, you like it, but we are not closed-minded. We are open to your comments, your concerns, questions that you have, input to make things better. We're definitely open to that. So now we will go over the renewal timeline briefly. So the renewal timeline for the general permit typically starts 18 months to 1 year before the permit expires. So this permit expires January 24th of 2024. We started talking about this permit and how we want to be moving to a comprehensive permit more than, this year. We started, talking to you all over the last couple of years, but really our main work started May of this year, where we started really moving forward with briefings, with management to discuss the issues, concerns, items that we have right now with the current way that our permit is set out, and what could we do to improve, to make improvements, to move forward to a different kind of permit that is better for all of you. And we started doing research. We started looking, okay, what other permits are out there in the country that have a comprehensive type of permit? What do the rules say? What does EPA think? So we started doing that kind of preliminary research starting in May to this month. We've met with EPA, both, Region 6, EPA headquarters, the staff and contractors at EPA that are working on the software for the MS4 electronic permitting system, as well as the annual reporting system, because Texas is going to be moving forward with using EPA's electronic permitting and annual reporting system. And then here we are today. Been working on the draft permit. And so we have shared with you in the handout some language that we have for some of the minimum control measures. And we are here at the stakeholder meeting. As I said, this is not your only chance to give us comments. You will have 2 weeks to provide your written comments to us after today. Then we will continue to prepare the permit. We will look at your input, your comments, and digest it. We might reach out to some of you to make sure we understand your comment. And we will just continue working with that internally. Then our goal is to send this draft permit to EPA December of this year. EPA will then start their 90-day review period. Then we're hoping that summer of next year, we will then have the public notice where we will publish in the Texas Register and then in at least one newspaper across Texas to let you know that the permit is available for the 30-day comment period. At the end of the 30-day comment period, which is really a Monday because the 30 days end, I think, on a Sunday typically, so it'll probably be a Monday, where we will end with a public meeting. So we will have a public meeting at the end of the comment period. Then, we will respond to those comments, and those comments will be responded officially, and it will be in the form of the Executive Director's Response to Comments document, that we will then move forward either in the end of December or early January. We will propose to come back to this room to present in front of the commissioners the permit that we're hoping to be issued and adopted at commissioner's agenda, so that it's effective January 24th of 2024. So these are the major steps that we have in the renewal process timeline. What you don't see is probably a zillion steps in between. The timeline is really like 4 pages long. So there's a lot of briefings that happen in between, each of these stages. We have our timeline is really set up in 3 stages. We have what's called the concept stage, then we have the proposal stage, and at the end we have the adoption stage. So right now we are in what we call the concept stage, meaning we're conceptualizing this draft permit, what it's going to look like, and to get permission to go to EPA with a draft permit. The second stage is where we focus all on public notice, public comments, and then of course the adoption is where we focus on the briefings and everything to adopt that permit. And so in between there, like I said, there's a lot of briefings that happen at the team level, the section level, division level, executive directors level. So there's a lot of briefings, and so that's why the timeline is the way it is and why it takes us a while to get through it. But we also go out to our program areas, and so I'll talk to you a little bit more about that internally. We discuss things with our program areas that are affected by this permit. So the next thing now, Michaela will go over the overview of the existing permit.
Thank you. Okay, so just to make sure everybody's on the same page, in case there's anybody tuning in who's not as familiar with the existing general permit, we're going to go over that just really briefly. So the current Phase 2 MS4 general permit, its permit number TXR 040,000. We also refer to it as the small MS4 general permit. That general permit was effective on January 24th of 2019, and it's set to expire January 24th of 2024. And of course, this general permit authorizes the discharge of stormwater and certain non-stormwater discharges from our small MS4s into surface water in the state. And in case you aren't familiar, as Rebecca said, MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. And MS4 is a publicly owned or operated stormwater drainage system. So basically, the system that's designed to collect and convey stormwater, it could include storm drains, ditches, curbs, gutters, streets and roads with drainage. Another important term to make sure everyone's familiar with is urbanized areas. An urbanized area is a central place or places that are densely populated and has a minimum population of 500,000 people, and then that minimum density of 1,000 people per square mile. This is an area that's defined by the U.S. Census Bureau, and it's critical to understand because it defines basically what small MS4s are. So those MS4s that are in U.S. Census Bureau developed urbanized areas, or UAs, are our small MS4s that the permit sets requirements for. Also in our existing permit, we use a tiered permitting approach based on our MS4's population. So we have 4 levels. Level 1 are for those traditional MS4s that have a population of up to 10,000 people in the urbanized area. Level 2 is populations of 10,000 to 40,000. And then we also include in level 2 all of our non-traditional MS4s, like our municipal utility districts, universities, prisons, other kinds of MS4s that aren't a traditional city. And the permit has some additional requirements for those MS4s that are in MCM2. Then in level 3, we have those MS4s that are population of 40,000 to 100,000 with additional requirements in MCMs 2, 3, and 5. And finally, level 4 are our biggest MS4s, those that have a population of 100,000 or more. And they have additional requirements in MCMs 2, 3, 4, and 5. And they would be the MS4 level required to implement MCM 6 in the existing general permit. There are some waiver options available for those MS4s with populations of less than 1,000. Here's a quick look at how this kind of falls in Texas and how our MS4s are divided up. You can see that the vast majority of our MS4s are considered a level 2. That makes up 64% of the universe, followed by level 1, about 20%. And then the smaller amounts are in our levels 3, 4, and the waiver option. So the existing general permit is covering the federal MS4 general permit remand rule. This was a rule that was published in 2016 and made effective in 2017. The rule basically requires states to develop their permits following one of these 2 options. Option 1 is called the comprehensive general permit approach. And this approach means that the general permit itself should include all of the clear, specific, and measurable requirements necessary for the MS4s to meet the permit standard to reduce pollutants to the maximum extent practicable, or the MEP. The option 2 is a 2-step general permit, sometimes called the procedural approach. So it includes, of course, 2 steps. The first one being that there's a general permit with some clear, specific, and measurable requirements for parts of the permit for MS4s. And then there's a second step where we are the state establishing additional requirements and best management practices for individual MS4s through their stormwater management programs. So it's basically like MS4s are writing their own permit in the form of their swamp. Of course, in Texas, we currently implement option 2. We have the Texas 2-step permitting process. So this looks like TCEQ issuing the statewide base general permit, sometimes called the master general permit. And then MS4s will write their own stormwater management program or swamp based on the general requirements in that base permit that creates their own enforceable permit requirements. TCEQ and EPA have to review each MS4's application or notice of intent and the stormwater management program. Then our MS4s have to publish notice of their application in SWAMP in a newspaper, starting a 30-day comment period and an opportunity for public meetings. Then TCEQ has to respond to any public comments and hold public meetings if they're requested. And then after all of that, TCEQ can finally approve the application in SWAMP to authorize the MS4 under the general permit. And then also included in the 2-step, if an MS4 needs to implement a public notice process for a notice of changes, so any notice of change that's not a minor modification, they would be required to publish notice on their own website or on TCEQ's website if they do not have one. So as part of the two-step, like I said, the MS4s are developing and implementing their own stormwater management program that needs to incorporate all of our minimum control measures, or MCMs. And as you can see on the slide, the existing permit has 7 MCMs, as they're written here. The 7th one is an optional minimum control measure for those MS4s that wish to implement it. The stormwater management program has to include a schedule of implementation with months and years that show how everything's going to be accomplished in that 5-year permit term. And the additional requirements are included for those MS4s which discharge into impaired water bodies. And all MS4s would be required to submit an annual report about all that they've accomplished over each year of the permit term. The stormwater management programs are going to address minimum control measures through best management practices and measurable goals. And the measurable goals are required to be clear, specific, and measurable, which is something that came out of that federal remand rule. So the measurable goals are going to specify how MS4s are tracking their implementation over time, seeing their progress and how they're implementing best management practices, and making sure that those best management practices are effective in reducing pollutants to the MEP. And overall, just tracking their environmental improvement from the implementation of the best management practices. The existing permit also includes an opportunity for MS4s to share their swamp responsibilities. We call them coalitions. So it's just multiple MS4s working together to meet some or all of their swamp requirements. And those MS4s that choose to work in a coalition include the names and authorization numbers of each of their coalition members as part of their application, and the stormwater management program. And then the stormwater management program includes a clear description of each of those members' responsibilities for the specific MCMs or other swamp elements, depending on how it's divided among the coalition members. And finally, I mentioned before that MS4s may have additional requirements for impaired water bodies. So those MS4s that do discharge to impaired water bodies have to implement additional requirements under the existing general permit. And by impaired, we mean a water body that's been identified as not meeting the surface water quality standards in the TCEQ and EPA approved Texas Integrated Report Index of Water Quality Impairment. We like to shorten that as just Texas Integrated Report. And impaired could mean with or without a total maximum daily load, or a TMDL. And MS4s then are required to annually evaluate the status of their receiving water bodies to see if they've been delisted or newly listed on this report. And then they'll be required to report the status in the annual report each year. So that was a really brief overview of what the existing permit includes, just to get us on the same page. Now we'll switch gears into the exciting stuff that you're all here for, the proposed changes, and Rebecca's gonna start us off with those.
Thank you, Michaela. So now that everybody, got refreshed on how our general permit is laid out currently, we will move forward with, starting some of the bigger proposed preliminary changes that we have for you right now. So I sort of mentioned that, the timeline for the permit is, lengthy. And there's a lot of steps, a lot of work. And so I want to give you an idea of what it takes to make the permit, either a renewal or or a new permit, is that we get input from stakeholders, permittees, consultants, those of you that are, on the local level implementing it, also from the public. So, anybody that we've heard over the years, concerns, language issues, problems, all those, we keep those in track to make sure that we address them the next time the permit gets opened. We also seek input internally. So we go to the Office of Enforcement and Compliance, enforcement, the regional investigators. We go to Small Business Local Government Assistance. We go to the Total Maximum Daily Load Group, our water quality standards. So we reach out to everybody that had input into language that is in the permit, as well as those that implemented, that answer questions every day, so that we can understand what is working, what needs to be revised, what can be better. We also go with management input. I told you that there's management briefings, so throughout those management briefings, we get management's input to address, their concerns or anything else that they would like to see moving forward in this permit. Then, any new rules that come up, any state or federal rules that would affect the permit, then we have to consider those. How are those going to affect the permit? As well as EPA Region 6, what is EPA Region 6 saying? How are they moving forward with some of the other permits in the region? EPA headquarters, what are their messages to us when they communicate with us as states of what they expect and how we're moving forward. And of course, as you know, for the MS4 permits, they are an iterative approach. So every permit cycle, we need to do better, we need to do more, we need to really keep striving to improve the environment. Some of you may not know, weren't around, but several years ago in the 2012 timeframe, EPA said, hey guys, in Texas, we're going to give you this impaired water bodies language, and we're going to give you the opportunity to make improvements. If not, permit cycles coming in the future, you may actually see limits in there, like California or New York, and we're like, no, we don't want that. So we are hoping to still continue that. So that's why every permit cycle we need to do more, we need to do better. Your stormwater management programs need to implement a few more things to make more improvement in the stormwater quality that is impacting the water bodies. Unfortunately, we're not seeing TMDLs or impaired water bodies go away. We're actually seeing them come in more. So you definitely, as an MS4, do not want to be the source of the problem. But anyway, we get comments, from others' input. We, in this case, as we're proposing to move forward to a comprehensive general permit, we also went out and sought what other MS4 general permits in the country look like. And so some permits, are still very much either a two-step or a hybrid of a two-step in the comprehensive. So there are some states where they are now approved after the 2017 rule that Michaela talked about. They are now truly a comprehensive permit. So we do get a really good idea of what EPA is approving, what they're looking for. So we modeled, our permit based on that. So anyway, we gather all that information, and we try to move forward with the draft permit. So the first proposed change that we have is that we are moving from the Texas two-step to a comprehensive type permit. And if you hear me, I always like to use that, Texas two-step. And I was telling Michaela, I didn't get the Texas two-step logo in one of my presentations. This might be the last time I talk about the Texas two-step. Just for you to know, I don't even know how to do the dance, but but anyway, we're moving away from that. We want to go to a comprehensive type permit, and we believe this is the best thing to do for you, for us, for everybody. So we are going to propose to revise the permit to meet the federal rules for the 2017 MS4 General Permit remand rule to meet their comprehensive standard. We're also going to prescribe specific requirements and BMPs that you as MS4s need to follow and implement in your stormwater management program. We are going to, however, still have that flexibility that we are offering now, but slightly different. So you are going to still have some flexibility to address local concerns, local resources. We are going to remove the public notice requirements for NOIs and notices of change. So this will drastically reduce the expenses from the MS4s. You don't have to publish in the newspapers. And with that, the savings can be either $1,000 to $5,000 depending on where that MS4 is located. So we feel that that in itself is a huge savings, that you don't have to publish in the newspaper for your notice of intent nor certain notices of change. So that is really good. Other things regarding, changes to the permit because of the comprehensive permit type is that the base general permit is going to have to include, like I said, the clear, specific, and measurable requirements as the rule, states. So to meet that, then we're going to have a list of targeted audiences and pollutants that must be identified, that must be addressed in your stormwater management program. Then we're also going to include a table of activities or BMPs with associated measurable goals for each minimum control measure so that we can specify the frequency and the minimum to pick from. And again, this information that you're going to see in the permit is coming from Texas MS4s. You know, we've reviewed a lot of applications, we've gathered a lot of information, we're building a database of information of the BMPs and how often, you know, people are doing it, you know, doing this BMPs or the activities, the minimum frequency. So we're collecting that information. So what we have in the permit that you are, you know, going to hear a little bit more of later when Michaela goes over it, those are things from Texas. This is what Texas is doing. We also gather some information from other states, but we believe that information, we also see it in our MS4s here in Texas. So again, we want to move to a prescriptive permit. However, we're still going to keep flexibility. So the flexibility comes in that we're going to have a menu of items, and you will understand more once Michaela goes over the permit language, what that means. But there's going to be a menu of items that you can select from. So in that case, it's not like all of you are going to have to do the same thing. You know, in some cases, you know, you all can still be in different colors and shapes and forms as you need to. That way you can address your specific concerns. You know, everybody's maximum extent practicable or MEP is different. So we want you to make sure that you address that based on your MEP, your local issues, environmental impacts. Then, of course, you know, as we currently have every level as you move up from level 1 to level 4, we're going to have an increase in the requirements. So you will have to do a few more things, but again, you're going to get to pick from a list of items that we have in the permit included for you. So for that, you know, we want to refer you to pages 3 to 16 of the handout, where we actually are giving you permit language of what we believe is a permit that will meet the comprehensive type of permit that's clear, specific, and measurable. So Michaela will go over that in a little bit. But for now, keep moving with the next change related to the comprehensive type permit is that, you know, we're going to remove the requirement for you to submit a stormwater management program to us. Yay, you know. Less paper, less paper, but that doesn't mean you don't have to develop a SWAM. You still are going to be required to develop a SWAM. You just do not need to submit it to us for review and approval. So this general permit, if you understand the concept of the MSGP and the construction general permit, you know, you understand that the NOI is developed, it's submitted, but the stormwater pollution prevention plan stays on site, and the investigators or the local MS4 are the ones that then review that stormwater pollution prevention plan. So this is the same concept here. We're going to have a general permit where you are going to be required to submit the notice of intent, but the stormwater management program needs to be developed, kept on site, not on a shelf where it collects dust. It needs to be implemented, updated. So that's still not going to go away. The only thing is that you don't need to submit it for technical review. As well, you know, moving to a comprehensive permit, it removes the TCQ or EPA requirement to review every single NOI and stormwater management program to determine that you are meeting the maximum extent practicable and that you are meeting the technical requirements of the permit. So therefore, like I said, we will only have to do an administrative NOI review, which can be done much quicker. And in the NOI, when you submit that, you are going to need to, in that application, identify the BMPs that you are going to be implementing. And that, of course, then is going to streamline and set the path forward for your annual report. Because you're going to be submitting that information in your NOI, the system will automatically have that in its memory. And when you come in a year later, whenever to submit your annual report, that information is going to already be pre-populated, and it's going to say, hey, MS4, you said you were going to distribute 100 flyers regarding, you know, PET waste this year. Did you do that? And so then you just go yes or no. So that is going to also streamline how you submit your annual report in the future. So these are basic 9 steps that we currently have in our Texas two-step general permit. Is that, we have the administrative review. Then we go through the technical review by the water quality standards team, by my team in Stormwater. We send you notices of deficiency. In some cases, it's 1 or 2 notices of deficiency rounds that we have to go through. Then EPA has the opportunity to review them as well. Then we have to send you the draft public notice, which then you have to publish in the newspaper for a 30-day comment period. If we get comments or requests for a public meeting, then we have to hold that. And then we finally can issue your authorization. So this is with a two-step general permit. With a comprehensive general permit, we go to this. All those steps get removed, and you simply submit your notice of intent, which gets an administrative review. And again, you're submitting this in the future electronically, so the system will validate your information. And the administrative review from a person may be either not there or minimal, depending on how you answer questions. And then you pay, you sign, you submit, and you get your authorization. So that's what that means. But of course, when you are submitting your NOI, you need to have your stormwater management program already, developed and, ready to go. So that's what a comprehensive general permit means. So other revisions related to the electronic reporting system that we're going to be going into for permits as well as annual reports. We need to comply, like I said, with the electronic reporting rule that was published in 40 CFR Part 127. So all general permits need to be in an electronic form submitted, the applications as well as the annual reports by December 21st of 2025. So since our permit is going to expire January 2024, we're moving forward with that. EPA is working with every state that is going to be using their system to get placed on a schedule so that they can work with each state to customize as much as they can. There's a caveat to that. As much as they can customize that program to fit the state. So we are scheduled to be working with EPA program area that is working on the Ms4 reporting program later, middle of next year. So then, we will probably open it up for some Ms4s to beta test the system to make sure that, everybody understands so that we can, hear the issues, concerns, so that we can develop some customized guidance as well as maybe some customized videos for people to understand how to submit their application via that system. And of course, because we have to go into the electronic reporting world for permits and annual reports, then there are some changes that have to be made. So these changes are based on so far our understanding of the EPA system and with their communications that we've had with them in meetings. So the first one is that the minimum control measure, as Michaela went over earlier, we have 7 minimum controls, but the federal rules have 6 minimum controls. So what we did is, some of you recall, a couple of permit cycles ago, we combined the federal MCM1 and MCM2 into one. Well, now, because of the system that we're going to, and because of consistency, because the federal system for permits, the EPA has developed it based on the federal rules. So we have to go back to splitting our MCM1. So now it's going to be MCM1, Public Education and Outreach, and MCM2 will become Public Involvement and Participation. So we do not believe this is going to be a huge impact, because in our permit, MCM1 is already sort of split up into 2 sections. But again, this is a requirement so that we are consistent across the nation with other states, as well as getting into EPA's permit system. So then what does this mean? That means that the other minimum control measures will just be renumbered to be 3 to 8. So ultimately, we will have 8 minimum control measures. The other change that we have to make because of the electronic reporting system is that we need to reduce our annual report year options that we have given you in the past to only one. So the reporting system only can handle one, and believe us, we tried questioning left and right. If you know me, I can, ask 20 questions and, try to push different ways, but they cannot customize it to that level because they want, again, national consistency. So they said, Texas, you have to pick one reporting year. So we looked at the data. What are the MS4s right now in Texas doing? And as you can see, we have over 55% of the MS4s in Texas have said that they have a calendar year. And of course, the calendar year goes from January to December 31st. And then 22% of you said that you're going with general permit year, which when this was set up was very different, but because of delay in the permit in 2012, now it almost seems to match the calendar year. So those MS4s will probably not have much of an issue because it's just, a few days off. But then we have the rest of you that are in fiscal year, sorry, the number is really small, 23% of you that have chosen fiscal year. So for those of you, then we need to work out how you're going to come in line with the permit when the permit gets issued for your annual report. So we will definitely propose to have language in the permit to explain how the MS4s will need to address the change during the first annual reporting year. Again, this change is triggered not by us, but it's triggered by the EPA system that we are going to be using. And as you can see, probably, except for 23%, I think, the other 77% will be okay with this change. So the other change related to electronic applications and reporting systems are that we are going to require for the coalitions to not only identify each member that they are part of the coalition as we do now, but we're also going to, as part of the streamlining the annual report, those coalition members, they're going to have to assign one member to be the main one to submit the annual report into the system. But that does not mean that the other coalition members don't have anything to do. No, they still have to submit something. And right now, we cannot tell you exactly what that's going to look like because apparently we are different, in Texas. So the software developers at EPA said that they could do something similar to another program, but the other MS4s that are part of the coalition will need to submit some kind of certification and sign that they have met the requirements and that the annual report was submitted by such other entity. So that's just something that is still going to be required for those coalition members that are not the main one responsible to submit the annual report, so that everybody knows that they fulfilled their permit requirement. So Michaela will continue with the changes.
Okay, so now some of the other modifications and clarifications we're proposing for this permit cycle. The first one is clarifying what we mean when we say a shared MS4 program. I know we always refer to them as coalitions in presentations and in our applications, but the word coalition doesn't actually appear in the general permit. So we're proposing to actually add that in to make it a little bit more clear with how we refer to them. So there is a little snippet of what some of that permit language looks like where we've added references to a coalition to clarify that's what we mean by a shared stormwater management program. We're also proposing to clarify a required action for when TCEQ makes a change to a total maximum daily load waste load allocation and lowers that waste load allocation. MS4 operators would be required to make an update to their stormwater management program. And then because of the electronic system, they would also be required to submit a notice of change. That way that information gets reflected on the annual report as well. I'm sure some of you might be wondering if you're familiar with the urbanized area and that the 2020 decennial census was published. The U.S. Census Bureau announced that starting in 2020 and moving forward, they will no longer be identifying urbanized areas, which of course is a big deal for us because that is the entire small MS4 program. So when that was announced, EPA issued some interim guidance on how to handle the elimination in the 2020 census. And EPA basically said that they're evaluating what to do next. They're considering, revising regulations, but in the meantime, they're directing states to continue with their general permits based on the existing requirements. So those MS4s that are already regulated based on the 2000 and 2010 urbanized areas. And they're also specifying that, the states can expand this permitting by using the existing designation criteria in the federal rules to make sure that, MS4s that may have otherwise been caught by a new urbanized area could be regulated under this new permit. If you want to take a look at that interim guidance, there's a link in the slides for you to go read it. So that is what we're proposing to do. We're going to keep the regulated small MS4s based on the 2000 and 2010 census. But then we are proposing some reference to the 2020 census. So where we're defining the MS4 levels, we're proposing to keep that they're determined based on your 2010 urbanized areas, of course, because there aren't new ones. But we want MS4s to use their 2020 population data to determine their MS4 levels, because we know that there's definitely been some growth in some MS4s. Maybe some MS4s have gotten smaller over time, and so we want the MS4 levels to be accurate for the actual current population in those areas. So if you know that you've grown a lot, you might want to start reviewing the permit and see if your level has changed, based on your 2020 population and how those population levels are defined, so you can start thinking about how requirements might look different. We're also proposing to kind of change how we're naming the level 2 MS4s. So currently, level 2 has traditional and non-traditional MS4s, and just to make it a little bit easier to refer to the different requirements for traditional versus non-traditional MS4s, we're proposing to kind of segregate those into level 2A and 2B. So 2A would be our traditional MS4s with that population threshold of 10 to 40,000. And then 2B would be referring to all of our non-traditional MS4s. Since we know the non-traditional MS4s are unique, they have different challenges than a traditional MS4, we needed to make sure that the permit addressed that, and it was a little bit easier to craft that language when we could refer to them more simply with level 2A and level 2B. Another proposed change is that we plan to modify the definition of waters of the U.S. just to reference it by the federal rule rather than actually writing it out. And that's something we've been changing in a lot of our general permits, so it's just making it more consistent across the general permit universe. We're also proposing to clarify that an MS4 that failed to apply for permit coverage during a previous permit cycle would not be eligible for the renewal grace period because it wouldn't be a renewal. So we're proposing to add this little snippet here into the permit language to clarify that if they failed to apply, then they don't get that 180-day window and instead would be expected to submit an application immediately. Another modification and clarification we're proposing is in the section of the permit where we talk about criteria for designating MS4s. Currently, we just kind of refer to the federal rule. So now we're proposing to go ahead and explicitly list that language here so that it's clear to everyone what that criteria is. It could be that EPA directs TCQ to start using this designation as part of their guidance moving forward with the 2020 census taking away urbanized areas. And if that's the case, we just want to make it really clear in the permit what this language is, so you don't have to go to the federal rule. It's listed here for you. And then, of course, there will be other miscellaneous and editorial changes, correcting some typographical errors, clarifying unclear language. Some of that will look like, we talked about how applications are going to be required electronically, so we would be doing away with any references to paper application except for electronic waivers. And other changes similar to that if we move to the comprehensive, then we're going to be taking away references to submitting a stormwater management program. So those kind of editorial changes to keep up with the other bigger changes we are proposing here today. And then one other change that we're considering, we haven't made a decision on it yet. We wanted to wait and see what our MS4s think. We're considering the removal of our current minimum control measure 7, which is authorization for construction activities where the MS4 operator is the site operator. So it's really only used by a very small number of our MS4s, only about 4% of them. And so based on that, we're considering removing it, but we want to wait and get stakeholder feedback. So definitely let us know what you think about that potential change so that we can move forward drafting the permit and making a decision on if we need to keep minimum control measure 7 or not. Okay, and as Rebecca mentioned, we prepared some preliminary proposed draft permit language and included it in the handout. So I'm actually going to pause from the slides and just pull the handout up on the screen so we can look at some of it together and see what the general permit could look like with the comprehensive approach. So this draft permit language would be specifically Part 3B 1 through 3 of the general permit. And this is just showing what minimum control measures 1 through 3 with the new numbering would potentially look like if we move to comprehensive. And then the remaining MCMs would be modified in a similar fashion if we follow this approach. So then the remaining 4 through 8 would include a similar kind of format and approach. So this first section is just kind of the introduction to the minimum control measures, It is updated to kind of refer to the new numbering system, explaining which MCMs apply to which level of MS4. There's also, language about how MS4s need to comply with all new requirements by the end of the permit cycle. So a lot of this is still the same from the existing general permit with a couple of tweaks. And the real meat and potatoes of what we changed is under the actual MCM, so numbers 1 through 3. So like we mentioned in the slides, with the splitting of MCMs 1 and 2, this is how it would look. So we would have MCM 1 being just public education and outreach. So the participation and involvement are in a separate MCM. So under this one, of course, we have the general statement about developing a comprehensive public education program, and then we get into the specifics of what that means for the different MS4s. So first, we're defining the kind of minimum target audience based on the type of MS4. If you're a traditional MS4, you need to address the residents you're serving, and if you're a county. And then we're providing the minimum for the different kinds of non-traditional MS4s. So this is the kind of pieces of the draft proposed permit that we definitely want input on. If you don't see your non-traditional MS4 being represented in this list, or if you think that we're not identifying the right minimum target audience, we want that kind of feedback so we can, really make the permit work for our MS4s as well as for the environment. So then we go on to specify how it gets a little bit more involved the bigger your MS4 is, the different levels. So if you're a level 3 or a level 4 MS4, we would propose that you have to add on some additional target audiences from this list. So the level 3 would pick one from table 1 to add into their program. And then the level 4s would choose 2. So they have the list to choose from and then the minimum amount specified in the permit. After target audiences, we talk about the specific pollutants and sources that we would want the MS4s to address as part of their education program. So this is specifying that everybody has to do a minimum of 1 target pollutant for each of the target audiences that they've identified. So that means more minimum number of pollutants for the bigger MS4s, those level 3s and 4s. The pollutant that they choose should be appropriate for their target audience. And then they could use the same pollutant for multiple target audiences if that's what the MS4 thinks will work best. And they could change annually if needed. Year 1 and 2, you could address grass clippings and leaf litter, and then in year 3 and 4, you could change it to vehicle washing or some other pollutant source from the list provided. Then the more details on the actual best management practices come in for this first minimum control measure, where we're actually talking about the best management practices that need to be implemented from each MS4 based on their level. So the minimum for everybody is going to be 3 for those level 1s or smallest MS4s. We would expect them to choose 3 from the list that I'll scroll to in just a second. And then as the MS4s get bigger, the number of best management practices they need to implement increases. And so this is what you're going to hopefully see in all of our MCMs is a table like this that describes the activity or the best management practice and then the associated measurable goal for it. And so, for example, if I'm a level 1 MS4, I'm going to read this table and I'm going to choose 3 from it to implement. And that's what I'm going to write into my stormwater management program and identify in my application. And so, as Rebecca said before, we did a lot of research. We've been reviewing a lot of everybody's stormwater management program, so we think we have a pretty good idea of what our MS4s in Texas are doing, and we're using that information to populate the table and to give the menu. But again, we want your feedback. If you see something you're doing that's missing that you want in the permit, tell us. If you think that no one's doing these BMPs, we don't need it in the permit. So that's the kind of feedback we want to get from everybody. And so this is just 2. I believe we have 6 or 7 options in this MCM. So a lot of them, like I said, we believe people are already doing them, things like marking storm drains, having stormwater signage, hosting meetings, like physical handouts, fact sheets, brochures, things like that. So those are all kind of included in this draft language and would be the menu that our MS4s are selecting from. And then we're also including language to address when maybe the MS4 themselves isn't the one actively doing the BMP, but you could be assisting some other organization or group doing it. I know a lot of our MS4s work with like the Keep Sugarland Beautiful or those kinds of organizations, and that's maybe more under MCM2. But whenever you're working with a group like that, you can count those activities even though you yourself might not be doing the bulk of the work. If you're contributing in any way, that can count toward your best management practices and the work that the MS4 is doing. And so we've included this language to kind of explain that. And so MCM2, since we split it, this is the public involvement and participation. It's laid out in a very similar way. So we have the minimum number that each level needs to implement and then the list of options for them. Like I said, the same style with the table showing the BMP and then the measurable goal. So things that we feel MS4s are already doing. It could be working with groups to provide some kind of stormwater training. I know a lot of our MS4s do educational events, either at schools or some kind of public event. And some of our non-traditionals especially do a public meeting to get input on their stormwater management program. It could be a board meeting, a city council meeting, or just a general stakeholder meeting kind of like we're having today. That could count toward this public involvement best management practice list. And then same as before, the opportunity where if you aren't running it yourself but you're contributing to it, you can count that toward your activities under the MCM. And then third and finally on this preliminary proposed language is for our illicit discharge and detection elimination, or IDDE. So you'll notice that a lot of this language is still similar to what's in the existing permit because it almost already describes the best management practice, just with a little bit fewer details than is required for that true comprehensive style. So we've kept kind of the main language, but then we're still including the table like we saw in MCM 1 and 2 to describe the actual best management practices. So here we have just a list of, required items like the map, procedures, things like that, specifying which things apply to which level. So, our bigger MS4s, like the level 4, have more additional requirements than our smaller MS4s. And then we have, language specifically for our non-traditional MS4s that may need to, rely on other MS4s or TCQ to respond to certain things. And then finally, after we've described each of them, we actually include the table of best management practices. So table 5 is what's required for everyone. And this is, set up the same way. So we're describing the best management practice and then what the goal would be for the MS4 implementing it. So things like your corrective action, how you're going to respond to illicit discharges or illegal dumping, and responding with corrective actions, how you're going to review and update procedures, maintain those, conducting inspections in response to complaints. So this is all the kind of language we already see in the stormwater management programs. We're just making it more specific in the general permit itself in the form of this table. And then there's a similar table for whenever we get into the additional requirements. So these added requirements for our bigger MS4s, level 3 and 4. We have the quick description of what's required, and then the table summarizing it with the actual measurable goal. And then again, the ones that are just for level 4, the same. We have the quick description. It looks almost exactly like what's in the existing permit. And then we add on the table to actually include the specific best management practice and a measurable goal. So this is how we were proposing to kind of change the existing general permit to meet the more comprehensive requirements from that federal rule. And we've seen a lot of other states have developed their permits in a similar way. And we particularly like the table style because that's how a lot of the stormwater management programs are already set up. It's really easy to read and see what exactly is required and what exactly is the goal, and will translate more easily into the application portion. So that's a quick look at it. I won't, read all of them. You all have the handout you can review, and it is available online if you haven't seen it yet. Definitely go download it. And so with that, we can switch back to the presentation.
Okay, so thank you for listening. I'm sure some of you, this is the first time you're seeing this, you're trying to understand, follow, digest it. Some of you are probably already, full of questions or comments. Not just for your comments or, basically not just for your comments here, but also those that you submit when you submit your comments in writing during the 2-week comment period. Please do not just say, I don't like this, or I like this. This is terrible, change it. We need to get the reason why, justify it, provide alternative language, provide tweaked language. I mean, you have this as a PDF document. You can go ahead and cut language from that, and do red line strikeout, provide comments, whatever it is, so that your comment, your message to us is clear and we understand, and really consider it, well, if you have that good kind of information, documentation to give us. Again, we want to say that these comments, comments changes, preliminary changes, are based on drivers that are beyond us. They're drivers that either going to an electronic reporting system requires national consistency with the rules, or national consistency with other, permits that are getting issued that are comprehensive, making sure that we are fitting well with the comprehensive standard from the federal rule. as well as, we are, proposing changes that are things that I think you will see, as Michaela said, MS4s are doing in Texas. We really tried, very hard to, include that. But as well, unfortunately, right now, as we are with the 2019 general permit, have not had the resources to get your MS4 authorizations issued in a timely manner. And so we really had to study hard what could be done, what could we do better, what can we do different as an agency, as well as hearing from, you as the MS4s, what can be done as well to help you. So we feel that moving to the comprehensive general permit type is the best thing for MS4 so that you get your authorization, your permit, you can implement it. You don't have to worry about what do I do in the interim, how do I submit my annual report, what do I do here, what do I do there, and then have all those items and issues that have been, or those issues that have been the problem in this last couple of years with the current permits, as we have not had them issued in a timely manner. So because of that, we feel that moving to a comprehensive permit is the best thing ever. And we really want, to have everybody embrace it. And so we just want to figure out now, how is it that the permit can be written in a way that is going to be good for everybody as an MS4, that is still going to give you that flexibility as based on whatever level that you are or that you're going to be in the 2024 general permit. So please, keep that in mind. I don't want any of us to be closed-minded. We want to be open-minded and really think about what's best for the future for this general permit for the MS4s in Texas. And so conceptually, not that we shared everything, Region 6 is okay with us moving to a comprehensive permit. They're okay with sort of what we showed you. They haven't officially reviewed it. They just, we met with them and we sort of, showed them our concept and where we're going, because we wanted to see if there was anything earth-shattering that they would tell us right away. And so far, they're okay with, what we sort of laid out to them, but just know that we haven't sent it to them yet for their formal review. So we're here to listen to you first, listen to our MS4s, consultants that deal with MS4s, to get your feedback. So first thing is some reminders before we open it up to the stakeholder discussion. Make sure that you wait for the microphone before you ask your question or comment. That's so that everybody can hear, everybody in the webcast can hear, especially so I can hear, okay? Everybody, we want to share airtime. If one of you has a lot of comments or a lot of questions, we might need to tell you to, hold off a little bit and let others ask those questions or provide their comments, and then we can return to you if you continue to have more comments. But we do want everybody to be able to speak up and give their comments or ask their questions. And of course, webcast attendees, again, I will remind you to please submit your comments or questions via email to outreach@tcq.texas.gov. And then Danielle will read those questions and comments to us. So with those reminders, we will go ahead and open it up to the stakeholder discussion, question and comment period of this stakeholder meeting. So, over here first, sorry.
Hello, Mark, City of Waco.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And if you could state your name, and who you're with before you provide your comment. Thank you.
Mark Healy, City of Waco. One of the questions I had, well, one, I like it. Yeah. And I like the table format. I think that's really nice. Two, with the non-traditional for 2B, I take it. What, for like a university, is the population break, or what data are you taking for that?
I can answer that. Michaela with the Stormwater team. So all non-traditionals are level 2 regardless of population that they serve or are within their area. So that means universities are level 2 regardless of their population.
Other comments, questions from the audience here?
Liz Stone with Quiddity Engineering. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to go one at a time. I understand the NOI will be submitted electronically. That is correct. Will TCQ be providing guidance? And you also say it'll be submitted through TCQ or through EPA? And what is the system?
Okay, so like I said, we are in the beginning stages of that, but I was in the national work group that we started working on the electronic permitting and reporting system with EPA a couple of years ago. So I can tell you certain things, but how it's finally going to be there, how it's going to get there, that's something we don't know exactly yet. But right now there are, I believe, 3 or 4 states that are already in EPA system and are using this. But it is going to be different than steers, because it's not going to be our system. So it's not going to be going through steers. It's not going to be going through our e-permitting system. TCQ, with our limited resources and the time and effort it takes to do this, we could not do that. Our original plan was years ago, when the electronic reporting rule came up in 2015, our original was, we're going to just add a module to our steers e-permitting system. But looking at how an MS4 permit is, it is just very different. It is very daunting. And so when EPA started saying, we're going to build a system and you states can come in and we're going to do it, it's like, hey, free money, free work, we're all in for that. And so we changed, our plan to go and use EPA systems. So an MS4 is going to go and access, I'm assuming it's going to be CDX, that's the Central Data Exchange System, that's equivalent to our steers. The entity is going to have to get an account there, the MS4, and then they're going to, through there, access the MS4 permitting system. And they're going to, get questions, that you submit. So it's not like you're going to attach an NOI, you're going to answer questions. I'm an MS4 and I'm a level 2 and I have 100,000 population and I'm picking this activity with this BMP and this, So you're going to have levels of drop downs to menus to pick from. And so, that is something that either the MS4 may not want to do because they may not be technologically savvy. And so they're going to need a consultant to help them to fill out. So just think again, if you're familiar with our MSGP and construction, we have a lot of consultants that are the ones that submit the application. But then the authorized signature is the one that comes in and ultimately signs and submits, because they're the ones that are authorized to do that. So that's something that's still going to be potentially, available through this, but everything's going to be electronic. And I'm sorry, and then the beauty for that is going to be, like I said earlier, whatever you enter, so the first application, it's going to be work because you're going to have to enter all these zillions of things that the MS4 is doing. But then when the annual report comes in, everything's going to be there. So the system's going to know what the swamp is for that MS4 and it's going to say, okay, what did you do here? What did you do there? Did you comply? Did you not? And then at the end, the annual report, you're going to get feedback, quickly because we may not need to review it at all. It'll be that the system's going to validate, your answers, and it'll be there, and right away, the annual report will be complete, technically complete. But that's what we're looking for. So as soon as we are in the system and have more information, we'll be open to having a webinar to where we show you how it works. But just as we're dealing right now with our MSGP entities that are moving into the NetDMR, which is the electronic reporting system, we are going to have webinars. We are going to have guidance. We are going to have recordings available for people to read, or to watch, so that they can apply easier. I probably answered more than you wanted to know, but.
That's perfectly fine. And going off of the NOI again, it sounds like Texas is pretty unique that they have the 2A, 2B. Will that be a selection on the electronic NOI?
Yeah, that's correct. So In talking with EPA and their contractors and how the system is set up, we talked about a couple of different ways to kind of flow into the system how our MS4s are going to identify their level. And right now, it looks like we're going to have, similar questions to how the NOI looks now, where you'll identify your current population, your estimated population within your urbanized area. And then based on how you enter that, we'll have the level selection. And then whatever you choose as your level will then say which subsequent questions you get. So it'll validate, how many MCMs you're required to provide information for and that kind of thing. That's what it's looking like right now. Of course, like Rebecca said, until we get into the system, it's hard to know exactly how it's going to look.
So that's why we met with the PA, the software people early on, because we wanted to find out what are, as they call, the showstoppers for the non-negotiables, because they said it can be customized, but I really didn't know exactly how far that meant or how much that meant. So we explained to them our uniqueness, that we know we were different based on other states or the rules, so that we can understand what is it, so that we didn't say, okay, these are all the changes we have, and then later on we came back and told you, oh, we have more changes. So we wanted to get the big changes that will be needed to be made in this permit based from going into those electronic systems now. And so, yes, certain things CPA can customize or work with us, but other items, they are the way they are because of the program or also because of the rules and national consistency. Okay, I don't see hand right now raised in the audience, so maybe webcast people, we have some. Danielle?
Okay, so I have a couple questions from the stakeholders online. The first one will be from, please forgive me if I chop up your name. Mr. Kyle is the last name, Tahishi. Tahishiri. He asked, do universities fall under level 2 regarding residence population?
Yes, so all universities are considered a non-traditional MS4, which would fall under level 2.
Okay, question number 2 comes from Susanna Pera. And her question is, since under the comprehensive GP permits identify in the NOI the specific BMPs, they will implement them for MCMs. Will permittees have the ability to change the BMP they identify if the BMP proves to unsuccessfully in addressing the MCM?
Great question, Susanna. Okay, so yes, because you're going to be identifying on the NOI your intended best management practices, just like in the existing permit, every year you should be evaluating how things are working. Are they going well? Are they not going well? And if they aren't going well, you may want to choose a different best management practice from the table of options. And in that case, you will have the opportunity to do so. It would have to come in the form of a notice of change. We would then, of course, need to review the notice of change and make sure that it's a good replacement. You're justifying the reason why you're switching. And then in that case, we would approve, a change to a different best management practice to better serve your MS4 and what MEP means for you.
And she has a second question. Will permittees need to wait until the annual report before changing the BMP?
That's another good question. I haven't considered that, but it's something we can definitely look at and how we'll address that in the general permit itself.
Okay. Our next question comes from Tiffany Spicer, and she's wanting to know, are we keeping our original format for our stormwater management plan, or will TCEQ provide us with a new format for the plan?
Good question. So we have, broached the idea of creating a template for the stormwater management program. Since we are moving to the more comprehensive format, it wouldn't be a required template. If we do develop it, you would be welcome to draft your own and, keep the stormwater management program in whatever style you like. But we're considering creating a template as well for those MS4s that might want to use that.
Yeah, so that's, all right, so that's a great question. If you do want a template, let us know so that we can work with a small business local government assistance group who normally helps us with developing templates. So we see that there's an interest, that from many of MS4s, and that's something that we definitely will see we can put resources for that.
Okay, and I have another question from Ms. Susanna Petta. She said, did you say that if an MS4 population, a 2002 population has decreased and places them in a lower permittee category, either 1, 2, 3, or 4, that MS4 would need to meet the lower categories reduced requirements? And then she goes on to say, so if a MS4 currently required to meet the level 4 primary requirements population greater than 100,000 during the 2010 census, but the 2020 census identifies their population is less than 100,000, will they be able to reduce their current requirements and will also be required to meet the level 3 permit requirements?
Another great question, Susanna. So the way the permit is written, yes, that would be true. Ultimately, all of our MS4s would still be required to implement to the maximum extent practicable for themselves. So even though, your population might dip, if you still have the resources of a level 4, we would be expecting you to implement to the maximum extent practicable for your resources. So the minimum requirement for everybody who identifies as a level 3 under the way we've defined it will be established in the permit, but every MS4 would be expected to do the maximum extent practicable based on, their own situation.
Okay, so I have a question for Mr. Kyle. Again, can permittees use a different measurable goal than that they were prescribed in the permit, or is the prescribed goal what must be used?
So with the style of the comprehensive general permit, what's prescribed in the permit would be the required measurable goal. If you see, based on some of the examples we've provided, aren't going to work for you, we want that feedback. Tell us if you see an issue with it. If you think a different way to write the measurable goal would be more in line with your MS4 or of other MS4s, tell us about that. Like Rebecca said, the more details you can give us as to why it might need to be written in a different way, the easier it will be for us to evaluate those suggestions.
I would like to add that while you will have to do some minimum requirements from the permit, there's nothing that stops you from doing more. So there's others that you want to do, that's still an option.
Okay, our next question comes from William Nahas from City of Allen. Where can he view/review the proposed changes? He's looked on the website but cannot find them.
So those are available on our Stormwater Stakeholder Group webpage, and we can respond to this email and make sure you get the link as well.
Yes, and when you go to the Stormwater Stakeholders Group webpage, you have to scroll down to where you see tables, and there's going to be the handout, the slides presentation, and then as well as, the agenda. So yeah, you're not going to see it as a PDF right away. You have to go down to where you start seeing like a table, and that's where you're going to see all these items there.
Oh, okay. This is
Hello, my name's Lauren Gonzalez with Black and Beach. I'm a little confused about the, applicability for new or for permittees based on the removal of the urbanized area. Can you clarify that a little bit? So if there are no urbanized areas identified by the census, how do potential municipalities or entities understand whether or not they are regulated?
Great question. So the existing general permit is roping in people who need to be regulated based on the 2000 U.S. Census urbanized area and the 2010 U.S. Census urbanized area. So in 2020, they didn't identify any new ones. So we're still going to be following the 2000 and the 2010 until EPA provides any new guidance. There is the option for TCEQ to designate MS4s, and that criteria is described in the federal rules, and we are proposing to add that language to the general permit verbatim so you could see it. So right now, the plan is to move forward and just keeping the 2000 and the 2010 urbanized areas as our, kind of automatic designator, if you will, for who's regulated. And then TCEQ has the option to designate MS4s that we feel, maybe they would have been in a 2020 urbanized area had they drawn it to get coverage under that general permit.
Okay, so it sounds like there aren't any new permittees.
As of right now, correct. Yeah, there wouldn't be any new unless they somehow missed the boat and didn't realize that they were covered.
Okay, unless there's some sort of designation by the TCEQ.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And with this permit, so that's a good question. Another aspect that's something that now we're going to try to address in the permit, so not just say, okay, renew your permit, but hey, by the way, some of you missed renewing. So now they are going to have special language that we're going to carve out for them so that there's not a problem with enforcement, related to that. So now we're going to say, okay, if you missed the boat, you need to do this, and, we're not going to give them a deadline because they're already in trouble. But, so very clear again, the census urbanized areas to determine if an MS4 is going to be regulated will be from the 2000 and the 2010 U.S. Census urbanized areas, but then the population will be used from the 2020 census population data to determine the level of that MS4. And if they're going to be a level 1, 2, 3, or 4, that's where we're going to use the 2020 census data for the population.
Okay, I have a question from Cody Cash from the city of Irvin. Is there a plan to transition phase 1 MS4s to similar reporting style? It seems that the SWMPs are extremely late for approvals and/or in comments. I think the standardized approach is great, but we are working with really delayed timelines due to TCEQ. Some of us are struggling to depend on our state-regulated entities. Waiting years for SWMP approvals does not inspire confidence.
Yes, so that's a great question. And nice to see there's phase 1 attending as well, not just phase 2s. But yes, just as we are moving forward with electronic reporting for the general permits, MS4 World, we are doing that with the phase 1 as well. So the phase 1, you've had your language in your permit for, a while saying that you will submit your annual report electronically if the system's available. So we hope that the system will be available also around the same time as this MS4 gets issued, because we're going to be working with EPA at the same time on our MS4 program. So they're not really distinguishing it much for the phase 1 and phase 2 for the annual report, because they know that we have our own permitting program or system that's different. So these applications will still be submitted for phase 1s by paper for now, but the report will have to be submitted electronically, so that's something that we'll have to figure out, so stay tuned for that.
My next question comes from Blake Anderson. In the presentation, you mentioned that under step 2 process, permittees may have 1 or 2 iterations or submittals of the SWMP respond to TCEQ comment and resubmit. With no review, a permit may implement an inadequate SWMP. What happens if the permittee is implementing their SWMP as written, but the SWMP is inadequate?
It's a great question. So, of course, as we're reviewing the stormwater management programs, we are finding that almost all of the stormwater management programs require a couple of rounds of revisions Typically, our revisions don't involve taking away an entire best management practice or, requiring you to drastically change the activity you're doing. It's usually more related to how you're tracking and measuring what your measurable goals are for those best management practices. So it's definitely okay to be implementing your stormwater management program as it's written currently. We may ask you to make some tweaks or changes, and you'll have to do, the best that you can to go back and see if you can still pull that tracking information for how it might be revised. And then, of course, when it comes time for annual reporting, you can tell us about, how this impacted your ability to implement your program as part of that cover letter and the explanation in the annual report. And that will, give us a better idea while we're reviewing the stormwater management program, what was impacting your implementation of the stormwater management program.
Okay, my next question comes from Jordan Sweet. If year 5 ends on fiscal year in September 2023, when will the guidance come out to let us know how to follow the appropriate permit and how our new years will run?
Good question. So we're proposing to include, specific language in the general permit itself describing how, especially for those folks that followed the fiscal year schedule, in this permit iteration would move and report under the calendar year schedule moving forward. So essentially what we're going to have to do is specify that there can't be a gap in reporting the work that you've done. So from where your previous permitting reporting cycle ends until, the new calendar year starts, you would include that in year 1. So for that example, if it ends in, I think it was September 2023, then from September 2023 through to January 2024, you're going to have to include that as part of year 1. But that'll be more specifically, explained in the permit language itself. And, we may develop some kind of guidance or information on our web pages to try and make it more clear too for those MS4s that are having to make that big of a switch between fiscal year and calendar year.
Okay, I have a general permit question from Andrew Zargas. He said that he's accustomed to being in the state where there is a comprehensive permit. This requires multiple municipalities to adopt ordinance and allow them to allow more stringent requirements that go above the comprehensive permit. Has this been looked into, and will TCEQ be needing a copy of the approved ordinance?
Good question. So the general permit currently and in the future will still include the requirement for MS4s to have the appropriate authority to actually implement their program. For our traditional MS4s, that means an ordinance. So our MS4s will still be required to have an ordinance. The ordinance could be more stringent than what the permit requires if the MS4 desires it. TCEQ won't need to see the ordinance, but you will be signing and certifying that one is in place, or maybe you're updating an existing one to make sure that you're able to implement the permit requirements.
And my last question that I have from Mr. Achisu Wattside, MCM 1 for non-traditional MS4s, is the expectation that the non-traditional MS4 target for specific audiences listed in the permit as provided in the same language exhibited earlier, or will there be some flexibility for non-traditional to identify the applicable target audiences in the SWMP, since the TCEQ is only listing 4 types of non-traditional MS4s in the draft?
Our intent is for the general permit to have captured everyone in that non-traditional group. If we failed to do that, we would like to hear that. And so the intent would be that the non-traditional MS4s would be expected to address the target audience described in the general permit itself. And so if you see an audience that you address that isn't being reflected in the general permit, let us know so that we can, make sure that the general permit is reflective of what our MS4s in Texas are actually doing. That's the exact kind of feedback we would like.
Okay, comments, questions from attendees here. When you signed in, we asked you if you were wanting to ask a question. And so Liz had a question mark, but she already asked her questions, comment. And then the other person is John. So we answered your question? Okay. Others, do not be shy. Comments, questions? Oh, another one.
I got one that just came in. It states, since the preliminary proposed changes only includes examples of the measurable goals, will the stakeholder group be provided an opportunity to review the proposed permit language to provide the comments and the revisions? If yes, what is the expected time frame for the proposed permit review and comment?
So all of our stakeholders have from today until October 12th to give us their informal comments on what we presented today, including that preliminary proposed draft permit language. Like Rebecca mentioned, if you can be as specific as possible in those comments, that's the most useful for us. If you have, a suggestion for how it could be rewritten, we would love to see that. That'll help us a lot. And then, after we get the preliminary proposed comments, we're gonna kind of digest them. We will probably just meet as a team and go through them one by one and see how we can address any of those comments in the general permit. And then whenever we actually move to the formal public comment stage, you'll have a second opportunity to provide a formal comment that then again, we'll try and address it in the general permit if we can. And if not, we'll definitely provide, a formal response to that comment to describe, how a change was made or why a change may not have been made.
So yeah, just to clarify, the first 2 pages of the handout are a list of proposed changes, but pages 3 to the end of the handout 16, that is actual permit language. That is what our permit language is, but we just included the language related to the minimum control measures 1, 2, 3, the new minimum control measures 1, 2, 3. But please note that that is not examples, this are proposed permit language. So you are seeing our draft language as we have it right now for those 3 MCMs. And as we said earlier, if there's something that you feel we haven't captured, like I said, we are working, very hard to capture everything in the database, all the BMPs and everything that Ms4s are doing. So right now we're a little shy of maybe capturing, everybody. We probably have about a little less than half of the universe captured. So we're going to continue doing that to see if there's any more examples or things that we can include here. But, just wanted you to be clear that this is not an example. This is actual draft language that you're seeing now. And yes, as we get comments and as we see that there's more things that Ms4s in Texas are doing and they make sense to include them, then we're going to make them be, we're going to add them to this and make edits to it. But the next opportunity that you will see the permit will be when it goes to public comment period. Right now, what we're doing is sharing this to get, your input, your comments, to make sure that we are addressing things in Texas the way they need to be. And then we'll move forward to obtaining permission to get this permit over to EPA so that they can start their 90-day review period to get their input as well.
Thank you. Mark Healy again, City of Waco. One comment, as a phase 1, we do work in CDX and it's very user friendly. So for phase 2, that might be where EPA is going. CDX seems to be pretty user friendly for us. I had 2 questions as to potential phase 1 implementation of this style. First, do you foresee the table, which I really like, the table and the BMP stuff being implemented into phase 1 written permits?
I mean, we haven't talked about that for the phase 1s. I mean, we can, that's one of the things that the MS4 program for the phase 1 and phase 2s, it seems like one of them is always trying to catch up to the other one, Like we do this for the phase 1s and then everybody's like, well, well, not everybody, EPA basically saying, okay, well, then you need to get the phase twos there, and then the phase twos are here, and now you get to the phase ones there. I mean, that was how it was for the impaired water bodies language. You know, EPA is like, we need that in the phase ones, and they were objecting to all the phase ones, and they didn't want to move them until they matched. So it could be that we do go into that style. Right now, we haven't thought of that, but it's a good comment. Thank you.
And then
Good
second
idea.
question, will phase ones be required to move to calendar year only as well?
Not at this time. So each phase 1 MS4 has their own individual permit, which defines their reporting period. So if you wanted to move to calendar year, you could request that kind of a change in your permit renewal.
Okay, thank you.
And I think we have another question online.
I have a question that just came in. So it says on page 7 of the preliminary proposed changes, number 2, public involvement says participation. Can you clarify the requirements for the number of BMPs required for the different levels? The numbering is confusing, specifically number 1, 2, and 3. For example, does level 1 have to implement 1 or 2 BMPs?
So thank you for bringing this question up because I can see that I've made a huge typo. So sorry, everyone. You can look at a document 100 times and you can't catch it all, right? Okay, so under MCM2, public involvement / participation, in A1, 2, and 3, we've tried to identify the number of best management practices that each MS4 is required to implement. But the written number is different from the actual number. So follow the actual number in the parentheses, that was our intent. So level 1s would be required to implement 2 BMPs. Level 2A and 2B would be required to implement 3, and then levels 3 and 4 would be required to implement 4. So my apologies for that. That is incredibly confusing, but you can follow the number. It was just a typo mistake there.
So I have another question that came in from Mitchell Carpenter. What is the justification for removing counties from the non-traditional group and adding them to the traditional MS4 group? And also, can you provide a proposed table to the levels of corresponding population numbers?
So we are not proposing to remove counties from the non-traditional. They're still considered non-traditional. There is one section of our proposed permit language that kind of groups them when we're talking about target audiences, because the target audience for a city and a county is similar, so they're kind of, described in the same way. That's the only section of the proposed permit language that, maybe we're pulling them away from the group and describing requirements, but they are still considered a level 2, and they're still considered non-traditionals if you're a county.
But thank you for your comment, because, we can definitely tweak the language to be clear, because that was not our intent.
Okay, and I have another question for Scarlett Dean. So the question is, will we see proposed preliminary changes for the MCM 4 through 8 before they make it to the final draft?
Great question. We don't have plans to do that, but if that's something everybody, really wants or thinks that they can't move forward without it, we welcome that comment and feedback.
That's all I have for right now.
Okay. Another opportunity for attendees in person for comments or questions.
I probably get asked this quite often. Is there a comprehensive list of MS4s for the state of Texas, or is there a map that shows them? And I'm primarily asking because on the construction NOI, you need to send a copy of the NOI to the MS4 operator. And majority of the MS4 operators that I deal with, they get none. Even though I drive around and I see construction going on, but it would be extremely helpful.
So we don't have, like a document with a list, and we don't have a map at this time of MS4s. Anybody can see the list through our water quality general permit search as well as our individual water quality permit search. But just to clarify, construction site operators and our industrial operators are required to send their information to any MS4, not just a regulated MS4. So, we're working to make that more clear in our permit language for those general permits. But currently the only, list of the regulated MS4s would be through our water quality general permit search.
And I have one more question that came through from Julian Holmes, and it's the MS4 permit changes. If he understands correctly, the public notice is no longer required for an NOI. Does that mean there is no public comment period?
That would be the requirement under our proposed changes. So currently, under the existing permit, those are requirements, but moving forward with a comprehensive style permit, there would not be a requirement for public notice, and there would be no public comment period for those NOIs.
Okay. Any more? You're being a little quiet, but like I said, maybe you're like me, you digest, and then you sleep on it. And then tomorrow you're like, wow, this is amazing. We really like going to a comprehensive permit. That is what your pillow is going to tell you in your dreams. Again, for those of you that are consultants, reach out to your MS4s. Let them know, to review the permit language, to, look at the presentation, the webinar if they couldn't attend. And, like I said, during this 2-week comment period, send us your comments, questions as well. Typos, whatever it is that you find to make this work for everybody, that would be what we request. And again, don't just say, a statement of, I don't like it, or this is great, tell us why. Especially if you're saying it's great, tell us why, so we can use that, like when you go to social media, and you see people comment, this person said this, we can use that, But anyway, comments, questions?
Can I add something, Rebecca?
Okay.
I was just thinking about how we had the question about if language would be available for MCMs 4 through 8, although right now we don't have it available. You can still comment on it. You can tell us what you think those measurable goals should be, or how those tables could look. If you want to make suggestions, we're open to that. That could be helpful for us in drafting, the remainder of the permit. So you don't have to limit your feedback to what we've already written. If you have thoughts on how the rest of it should be written, we want that feedback as well.
Yes, and definitely don't forget that we want to know also, should we get rid of the current MCM 7, which will be MCM 8. Again, only 4% of the MS4s are using that, and in case you were not familiar with that, that means that the MS4 for their construction activities do not need to submit a construction notice of intent to us. They are sort of self-regulating themselves. And, from the beginning of time, I know a couple of MS4s who would tell us that it didn't work for them, that it was really hard to regulate their own. And so they had it chosen before, and then they got rid of it. But this permit cycle, interestingly enough, we had a increase in entities or MS4 entities that decided to pick that. But again, we're not saying right now we're going to remove it, but it is something that we thought it was interesting that we only have just a few. So please also give us, an answer to that. What do you think? Should we get rid of the current MCM 7 or keep it? Okay, so we will then, if we have no more questions or comments, move forward to ending this meeting, so adjourning, so that you can all go back.
If we could show the slides one more time for some of that final information.
Okay. So we're concluding the stakeholder discussion here in person and over webcast, but again, the 2-week comment period is available to you. Submit comments on the existing general permit, any items, that you saw, the draft language. What is it that you want to comment on or you have questions on? The rest of the permit that we didn't show you yet, that you are currently implementing, look at that. What is confusing, what needs clarification? Please let us know. Again, the meeting handout, the presentation slides, the agenda, they're all available on our Stormwater Stakeholders Work Group webpage. And you just have to scroll down to the table. You'll see all the, the items posted there. As well as the information of where you can submit the comments, but I'll give you that information. So right now you're submitting comments to Outreach for this webcast, but after this, your comments need to be submitted via email to a different email address. They're going to be submitted to swgp@tcq.texas.gov. SWGP is our stormwater mailbox for technical questions. So our mailbox is typically managed by both Dante and Madison. They alternate when they manage that. So please, make sure that you include in the subject line that you are commenting or have a question on the 2024 Phase 2 MS4 renewal. Again, this mailbox receives all technical questions, so we want to make sure that it's clearly distinguished by that title so that Madison and Dante do not miss that this is a comment that needs to be moved towards the different part of the team so that we can start compiling those comments to review and address them. Your comments are due by close of business Wednesday, October 12th, so you have 2 weeks. From actually 2 weeks and a few hours. We're giving you a little bit extra. But we really, really thank you for your time, for coming here, for your interest, for your comments, your questions. Both of you that attended in person as well as those via the webcast, we appreciate it. We really want to make this permit, be the best that it can be, and streamlined as best as possible moving forward to the electronic reporting world. And, so that MS4s can save money on resources by not having to do certain things that are required by the current type of permit that we have, as well as getting their permit authorization, faster and more in the streamlined fashion. So any other comments, suggestions, please submit them to us again at swgp@tcq.texas.gov by October 12th. We appreciate it. And other than that, I want to thank my team, especially Michaela, who's worked really hard on this. We're trying to also wrap our heads around this new concept of a comprehensive permit. It is, a different concept, and so we're trying to make sure we understand and align ourselves with that moving forward. But thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day and travel back safely to wherever you came from. And we appreciate you.